Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie. I am here to talk about my first generation college student story. A little bit about myself. My name is Stephanie Felland. I am currently a graduate assistant at the Women's Center here at St. Cloud State University. I hold a bachelor's degree in psychology and women and gender studies from the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. I'm currently pursuing my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling at St. Cloud State. And I have some of my background experience include sexual assault survivor advocacy, grief work with children and adolescents, and reproductive justice advocacy, and student engagement leadership. What do I wish more people understood about being a first generation college student? I wish that people understood how brave it is to be a first generation college student. I had to become very brave as a first gen student. No one in my family understood what I was going to school for. I would often ask like why I'm choosing my major. I'd often get told I should change my major. So I had to figure it out all on my own. I had to put myself out there to ask questions. I had to figure out even what questions to ask in order to find opportunities and figure out financial aid and registration, as we'll talk about, going forward. But also just challenging my imposter syndrome. I often struggled with just the feeling of I don't even know if I can do this. I don't even know how to do this. I don't even know like where to even go for things. Um, and I mean, obviously, I'm doing okay. Like I made it to grad school, but um, it was very hard going into it, and it's still very hard, and I struggle still with being a first generation college student. So I'm hoping like today's presentation will give you a little bit of relief or an understanding of what people may go through. So the second question is, how did I navigate the college process, such as like financial aid, registration, especially if you don't have any family guidance? Well, I had no family guidance, and so I did everything on my own. And how I did that is I honestly just asked questions. I went to all of the information sessions that my university offered. I was going to graduate school information sessions as a freshman in college because I knew that I wanted to go to grad school. I went to all the career services events that they had talking about like resumes and interviewing. I went to all of the things just because I didn't know anything. So, and also just being brave, as I've mentioned before, and reaching out to different departments on campus. There really are no stupid questions. The people working in like financial aid or registration are really understanding of where you guys are at, and they're willing to help. They're not gonna make you feel bad because you don't know. And they usually have the answer. If they don't, they will refer you to a department of the university that does know. Um, but I know it can be really anxiety producing to call them or to go in person. I recommend just sending them an email. They don't respond right away, wait a couple of days and another email. But I think just putting your adult pants on and just like, doing it and asking questions is my best advice. What surprised me about being a college student? I think there's a lot of things that surprised me, but I think the most important that I want to talk about is how lonely it can feel at times. It sounds sad, but this is something I've experienced and I've talked to other students about. In college, you are surrounded by so many people, but it can feel like everyone is so dedicated to their own path, and they are. Um, and so I think that can feel really lonely, especially like if everyone's busy, they don't want to make plans because they have to do homework or they have their own friends or whatever. I suggest just trying to put yourself out there. It takes practice, but trying to put yourself out there can be helpful. I think it, I think it's helpful just knowing that other people are experiencing this, that other people are also lonely in college. That's something that has made me feel better is I think there's this like discourse online that I was seeing that a lot of other students were feeling lonely. So I just wanted to kind of normalize that and bring awareness. If you're feeling super lonely and you're having kind of like mental health concerns, please reach out to the counseling center or a hotline or a friend. and let them know what you're feeling. Because I know it, it can feel really hopeless sometimes when you're lonely. So yeah, just try to put yourself out there. It won't last forever. And even trying to find like other first gens who might be feeling the same thing. What did I consider essential to my success in college? I would say probably networking, especially with professors and getting involved. I would not be who I am today without the support of my professors from undergrad. I know that not everyone has the luxury of having professors who are truly invested in their personal development. I would suggest going to office hours, going to different club meetings and events. Being involved really shaped my entire college experience. I was the president of two clubs. I was involved in a children's summer camp. I was a yoga instructor on campus. I did a lot of the things. And I know not everyone has the luxury of that, especially when it comes to working. Um, but I would say at least going to office hours and connecting with professors, um, even if you're going to office hours, not to necessarily talk about the homework, a lot of professors just would love to connect with you on a human level and talking about a movie that you guys are into, or maybe you guys both play the same video games, or whatever the professor talks about in class, because I'm assuming they talk about their personal lives sometimes. Maybe that's just psychology professors. But picking something and then going into office hours being like, hey, like you mentioned this, you want to talk about it, and maybe also bring like a homework question. But professors do, they love to talk about themselves. So if you can get them to talk about themselves and kind of maybe making that into a networking opportunity of, getting involved in their research or maybe a conference they're going to. Um, the what made me successful in college was the experience that I got outside of class. The next question is talking about if I felt different when going home. And then how does being first gen impact your perception in the world or of the world? Yes. Referring to the home question, I often feel like I don't fit in at home. I love my family to death, but I just feel like they have a hard time understanding the things that I'm passionate about. And a lot of it boils down to values. I'm part of a very progressive, liberal major and profession. But also it just comes down to life experience. They don't really have the framework always to understand my interests, and it's really been hard for me to deal with. There's a lot of grief involved of not feeling understood by your own family, and that's something that I've been dealing with since the moment I went off to college. Um, and it's something I'm still working to be at peace with. Yeah, I think just trying to relate with them in a different way of talking about hobbies instead of school can be helpful. Um, or even trying to I've sat down my family and been like, hey, I'm kind of like a new person now. Can you get to know the person I am right now versus who I was, in high school? Because, we're adults, emerging adults. So if you can have that conversation, like do that. Otherwise, um, I don't have much like advice, but it's definitely something I'm still working with and I'm still kind of sad about. But um, and then how does being first gen impact your perception of the world? I would say I think that being a first gen makes you learn a lot. I'm very independent because of being first gen. Um, I'm so curious. Like part of not knowing anything, like coming in, being first gen is I'm so curious and I want to learn more. And so a lot of that has to do with learning about experiences that are different than mine, going to different like cultural nights or going to different things that really widens your perception of the world and understanding of other worldviews. So it's impacted greatly of my perception. And then what advice would I have for other current or potential first gen college students? I would say, like I mentioned, being curious, asking questions. It sounds very basic, but that's what I did. Going to the information sessions held by the university, going to office hours and getting involved. Um, in college, I was the officer of two clubs. I started as a secretary and I worked my way up to the president of both of the clubs. And I think some may think it's silly to be involved in, student organizations, but they really are foundational in skills development. If that's like student engagement or organizing or even being a leader. I learned a ton just based off of the different things I was involved in. I also was involved in a summer camp. And so that was a lot of like organizational administration stuff. So I would say get involved. The more experience you have, the better you're going to look on job applications, internship applications, colleges. And going into my next point, college can be so much more than going to class or taking an exam. Those are important, of course. That's the whole reason of going to college. But college is an opportunity to learn about your community and really broaden your understanding of the world around us. So I really encourage you, St. Cloud State has the cultural nights, they have different, professional development events to participate in. I really encourage you to put yourself out there and get involved. I think that's the best advice I can give everyone. I know it's a privilege if you work a lot, maybe there's something virtual you can do. Um, the Women's Center does virtual events, even if it's just watching the recordings, but just gaining as much education as you get while you're in college. And then what kept me motivated during my academic journey was definitely celebrating the small wins. So that being like, you finished a big project or you just got to the end of the week or you finishing the semester. And also celebrating the big wins because at the end of the day, college is hard. Not everyone can do it. You are doing it, and that's a big deal. And especially as a first gen, I was essentially doing it alone. I imagine a lot of you are doing it alone or, close to alone. Um, and that's huge. That's such a big deal. And so if it's, buying yourself a coffee from having a bad day or going on a walk or, just, going to a musical or a concert at the end of the semester as like a reward, I really just advocate for celebrating the wins because what you're doing is a big thing. And kind of my like last words is just to be curious. I've talked about it a couple times, but just being curious, asking questions, celebrating the small wins, remembering that you're not alone, you're feeling lonely, try to reach out to someone, asking them to go to coffee or asking them to go on a walk, um, maybe expressing that you're lonely. Someone else might express that too, and just it feels good to relate to someone. And then just if you have any questions or want input on your experience, feel free to stop in at the Women's Center and chat with me if you'd like. I'd love to talk to you. Yeah, so if any questions, please feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of the school year.